When I was growing up, every time if I tried to do something and I couldn't do it well, or I failed at it, or I didn't have an aptitude or a talent for it, my father, to soften the blow of the realization that I had limitations, would say to me, "Richard, nobody can do everything except Sammy Davis Jr."
That's so nice.
And you do all of it so well.
Get out of here.
Yeah, come on. You don't believe it yourself? You don't have that faith in your talent yourself?
Oh, the talent, yes. You know, because God gave me the talent. It wasn't of my doing. But when I was raised in show business, it was part and parcel of our business, not to, speaking medically, not to be a specialist, but a general practitioner. A little bit of everything. You had to know how to say a line, sing a song, tap dance, do a joke, whatever. You had to do that.
One of the things that I guess if I'd thought about it a little bit longer, I probably should have realized, was the struggle in terms of working your way up to the top. I mean, one of the things, and this is something that's inconceivable to anybody now, that at one time you were told that you couldn't do impressions of white people. Mm-hmm. That's something as minuscule as that, that's so silly and so stupid.
I think the only reason I became a rebel in show business is because of the fact that I couldn't see any sense in it. You know, I didn't see why you couldn't do this and why you couldn't do that.
Who told you couldn't do James Cagney or...
My dad.
Your dad said...
My dad, my uncle, Will Maston, the man I affectionately call my uncle.
What did they think would happen if you went out there and started to do...
Well, you got to remember something. In those days, just let me explain something to you. In those days, we had TOBA, right? That was the abbreviation of Tough on Black Artist. That isn't what the A stood for, but...
we have imaginations. I think we can fill it in.
All right. If you work downtown at the Paramount, the Roxy, Lowe State, the Capitol Theater, the Strand, those were all theaters that no longer exist anymore. If you saw a colored, quote, act, and they were comedians who walked on the stage, they never walked out and said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," and then have the other guy walk out or start a conversation. They'd walk out, and here's how the act would start. Here is the audience. The guy would walk on the stage, and he'd say something like, "Why did you yesterday say to me..." Now, he ain't said nothing to the audience yet. So they worked in a guard-all shield. You understand? There was an invisible wall here as far as the audience was concerned until after, but that opening thing was always here, never to communicate. Now, I don't know who made these rules up. You understand what I'm saying? But that was the modus operandi.
But you changed some of the rules.
I changed them all that I could.
You changed...
You understand me?
I know, and you want to, but you know...
But, thank you. But in all fairness, I went overboard the other way.
Why?
Because I was going to let people know that they could look at a colored artist and he wouldn't have to sound, "How come you said..." So I started to sound like Olivier. You know. You understand me? And it was also psychologically a way of getting back. These are all negative things as far as I'm concerned, but it was a way of getting back at the fact that I had no education. I never went to school. So I wanted to prove to myself, see how well I speak, you know.
Well, how did you get so literate then?
I had a lot of help, you know.
Who helped you?
A man in the Army, a sergeant in the Army when I was 17 years old. I was reading comic books. That's all I would read, you know. And I could read, but I couldn't write. And Sergeant Williams was his name. And I started reading, and he would select books for me.
Was that the first book you ever read?
Which one?
In the Army? Was that
yes.
the first? That was the first book you ever read?
Yes.
What was the first book you ever picked up and read at 17? You know what it was?
Three Musketeers.
The Three Musketeers. Wow, that's not an easy book to read.
Nope.
That's a big, thick one.
I ain't going back and read it again. Let me put it that way. No, but what he wanted to do, he said, "You've got to read the classics." And then there was any time that I got to a word that I didn't understand, that night in the squad room at the end of the barracks, he'd pick it out, and I would circle it, then he'd explain it to me. So he really became a tutor for me.
You were in one of the first integrated units in the Army, I think that was, wasn't
Yes.
it? That was
experimental units, as they called it.
1942.
I was the original, I guess the original Black Henry Ulrich, you know. Hi! Hey, can I volunteer? You know?
But meanwhile, these guys would come and beat you up. They'd drag you into the latrine.
Yeah, I got my nose broken a couple of times.
In the Army?
Yes.
By these guys?
Mm-hmm. I didn't have, now don't misunderstand, I never had this.
Yeah.
But it was a little better than it is now.
During the course, you've had a lot of replacement parts, right?
Yes, I have.
How many parts of your body
Well,
are...
I have an artificial eye. I have an artificial hip. And that's about it.
That's,
you know, thank God the heart's in place. And the mind's in place.
You know what, though? I mean, one thing reading this book, and I think it's very important for people to know about all this, because you say the 30s or 40s, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it ain't that long ago.
No, it isn't.
And there are people who lived through, and let's talk about the 50s, too, and the 60s. And there's a continuum in history, and people tend to look at the world the way it is today and say, oh, yeah, everything has changed and everything's wonderful now.
No, it hasn't changed. It's gotten better, you know, by quantum leaps. But there's still about 4 more mountains to go before it, because every once in a while, you know it, you pick up a paper, and the nice thing about it is that audiences you're not afraid to discuss it, because I think in the final analysis, people on both sides of the color spectrum are going to figure it out. But racism is here, and we have to fight it. I mean, racism on both sides of the color spectrum. It's not just, you know, it's there, and it's blatant. And we have to fight it, because we'll destroy each other. You know, we don't have to worry about the Russians coming over here or the Ayatollahs or whatever. We'll destroy each other. And going around the world as I have as an entertainer, but as a human being, with all our faults, this is as good as it gets. You understand? America is as good as it gets. No, I didn't say...
I'm not saying it's perfect.
No, but I'm just... No, it's not perfect, but I'm saying to you, I stand as #1 example. You know, in so-called freedoms of all the other countries, they have never come up with a Sammy Davis Jr. You understand? I'm not doing an ego trip, but I mean, I don't see the opportunities there that in spite of all the jazz I went through, in spite of that, if the public embraces you, if you have talent, someone will say, hey, man, let this cat through. Let me hear him, you know? Right. And you'll embrace that. And only in America can that.
There have been times, and you've been embraced and loved as a performer, though, there have been times when people have thought that you were not as aware of the injustice.
And
that you were,
so.
That maybe you know, kowtowed to the establishment or became part of...
No, I never kowtowed.
Or
what I
became
tried
part
to
of the
do was to
establishment.
play the game.
Play the game?
Play the game.
For instance, like when you hugged Richard Nixon, I guess, is a symbol.
No. That had nothing to do with it. And if the same circumstances happened today, now, mind you, we're talking hindsight now.
Yeah.
But under the same conditions that happened today, the same thing would happen. Because I'm not going to say, hey, I'm sorry I did that. Because I didn't do it with any intent in mind. I'm going to make this move. I'm going to make... I am very emotional, just like when I walked on this stage and the reaction from your audience made me feel very warm. But in the midst of that, I grabbed you, didn't I?
Yeah.
Well, you ain't the president. You understand me? You understand me? Yeah. You ain't controversial. You ain't the president. So you don't grab the president. Don't squeeze the queen. You know, there are certain things you just don't do. But emotionally... I grabbed him because he had said, you don't buy Sammy Davis Jr. You have to earn the right to be his friend, and I appreciate the fact that he calls me friend. And 10,000 people stood and cheered, and I walked up and just said, thank you for saying that. And that's the picture they took. Now, under those same circumstances, do it again tomorrow. But if you ask me now, bring it up from 71 to today, no, I wouldn't do it. I sit like this and go, thank you very kindly. Thank you. But that's now. That's all.
Remember the movie The Defiant Ones with Sidney
Yes.
Poitier and Tony Curtis? A wonderful movie and a groundbreaking movie.
Absolutely.
It could have been a movie with Sammy Davis Jr. and Elvis Presley handcuffed together as two convicts on the lam. It could have been. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why it wasn't when we come back. Stay with us.
Who can take a sunrise, sprinkle it with dew, cover it with chocolate or a miracle or two? The Candy Man, Candy Man can. The Candy Man can, 'cause he mixes it with love to make the world taste good.